This House do now adjourn. Dr. RudiVis.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I can unfortunately not be very brief, so I shall try to be quick. I will also read quite a bit out of here, because I want the record to be entirely straight in all its detail of dates, times and names, of which there are quite a few. I will also take, I was going to say, no interventions, because I want to make absolutely sure that the record will be full. But I don't think I need to put that. The debate concerns the regulation of insolvency practitioners, with special reference to Heritage plc. And the government has repeatedly made promises to help small businesses to survive and prosper. And of course I welcome that. But there are contrasting interpretations of existing legislation. This is particularly the case when it comes to the excesses of the insolvency industry, as practiced by the banks and their servants, the insolvency practitioners. Through their greed and questionable practices, operated with impunity, many small and medium-sized companies are needlessly closed. Their directors, who frequently put all of their personal assets on the line, thrown out of work, and their families thrown onto the street to become an extra burden on the taxpayer. If all banks followed the example set by the Royal Bank of Scotland and separated the roles of reporting accountants and receivers, according to figures provided by the Independent Banking Advisory Service, 44,700 jobs a year would be saved. Meanwhile, the insolvency vultures continue to earn fat fees. Lord Sutherland referred to a case in the Lord's debate on 26 January this year, and that was the case of Heritage plc, Lloyds TSB Bank, and Grant Thornton. Heritage plc was quoted on the London Stock Exchange. It operated in East London and Manchester. It supplied all the major retailers in the UK with household articles. It employed over 100 people, many of whom were disabled. The former chairman of Heritage plc, Mr. Geoffrey Lampert, is a constituent of mine. And that is, of course, until Lloyds TSB succeed in evicting him and his family from their home. It is an interesting case, and one that perfectly reflects the unchecked excesses of the sharks I have referred to above. Before coming to me, Mr. Lampert took the Heritage plc story to the Bank of England, who said this is best dealt with by the banking ombudsman. The banking ombudsman, when hearing the Heritage turnover was in excess of 1 million a year, said, "It's not us, go back to the Bank of England." The Bank of England then said, "Go to the FSA." The FSA said, "It's not us, we don't look at individual cases. Go back to the Bank of England." The Bank of England had no further comment at that stage, and Mr. Lampert then went to the London Stock Exchange, and they referred him to the DTI D2 prosecutions. They concluded, and I quote, "Taking account of the Code for Crown Prosecution, it is not in the public interest to instruct an officer to conduct an inquiry," end of quote. However, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am satisfied that statutes are in place, but they're not being interpreted in a way that protects businesses and jobs from the excesses of the insolvency industry. In December 1996, Mr. Lampert approached Peter Elwood, currently Lloyds TSB Bank Group Chief Executive, and this approach proved to be similarly fruitless. Mr. Lampert has personally banked with Lloyds for more than 40 years. Truly, your life, your bank, as they portray in their soft advertising campaign. And I have found the facts about Lloyds TSB Bank are different from the image they're seeking to create. I've been provided with statistics, and I have them here, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that show the Independent Banking Advisory Service receives 36 times as many complaints about Lloyds TSB Bank's integrity, which is well defined, than they do about, say, the Midland Bank. Apart from that, apart from the fact that Heritage plc was quoted on the London Stock Exchange, The example of Heritage is one reasonably typical. Heritage banked with Lloyds since its inception, and that bank sponsored Heritage onto the London Stock Exchange in July 1988. As a result of that flotation, Heritage embarked, as you would expect, on a series of acquisitions advised by that bank. And in spite of what the directors believed was a long, close and mutually trusting relationship, Lloyds TSB suddenly closed Heritage PLC down. And the only logical reason for this action, which didn't emerge, incidentally, until 2 years later, was to conceal a sting operated with the aid of their co-conspirator, the insolvency section of the well-known firm of accountants Grant Thornton. And as I said earlier, Mr. Deputy Speaker, dates are important. Early in 1995, it emerged that Heritage then financial director George Rayner had been acting in a dishonest way with his PAYE. I won't go more than say that it was dishonest. It also emerged that Grant Thornton, where Rayner had personal friends and whom he had appointed tax advisors to Heritage PLC, were aware of this, but had chosen not to tell their client Heritage. For this reason, and for failing to keep a proper sales ledger, Rayner was fired in June 1995. Grant Thornton were fired as tax advisors a little later, in August 1995. And just at that time, the bank began to insist on my constituent giving personal security. In July of that year, the bank demanded an accountant's report and insisted on using Grant Thornton in spite of Heritage's objection. Heritage directors were only shown a draft of this report and were told that it was to be finalized after figures audited by KPMG were to be made available weeks later. In fact, it was finalized by Grant Thornton 4 days later. It misquoted the directors. It contained damaging conclusions which were not shared with Heritage PLC. Even more sinister, 3 weeks later, on August 10, 1995, another concealed report was prepared. And I say a concealed report, and I come back to that. Another concealed report was prepared which contained the conclusion, and I quote, "The decision to support Heritage is now finely balanced." A concealed report, end of quote. On that same day that concealed report came out, Mr. Lampert was told by Lloyds TSB how well the bank and Grant Thornton now believed Heritage was doing in overcoming the problems left by Rayner. Also on that day, Mr. and Mrs. Lampert were encouraged to make an equity investment, and that is different from a loan, an equity investment in the company of £250,000. This was with money loaned to them by Lloyds TSB Bank, secured on their family home. If he, Mr. Lampert, or any of the directors would have had sight of this August 1995 report, it is obvious that they would not have agreed to this investment. Even as late, and this is quite important, even as late as 1998, Lloyds TSB, brought through its solicitors Hammett and Suddard, was denying the existence of these two concealed reports. And I will come back to that. 1 year later, in about June 1996, when the Lloyds TSB Bank exposure had been reduced by about $500,000, and the Lloyds TSB Bank had earned about $250,000 in interest and fees, Mr. Lampert received another immediate call for an additional $125,000 loan. He was unable to meet the bank's timescale, simply.
I'm sorry to interrupt the honourable gentleman. I hope he can assure the chair that the matters he's dealing with are now historic in a legal sense, and there's no question of sub judice arising from continuing proceedings. Mr. RudiVis.
Thank you for that advice. I say he was asked for an additional £125,000, and he was unable to meet the bank's time because he was abroad. So Lloyd's, and this is the normal trick in these circumstances, Lloyd's returned 3 checks on important supplies, and it changed a cash flow problem in a cash flow crisis. The directors worked on a restructuring plan involving a firm of accountants who undoubtedly would have insisted on seeing all reports on the company. Heritage also engaged in merger talks with a supplier, and both these options were put to the bank. Both were rejected without explanation and over the heads of the entire board of Heritage. Lloyd's TSB Bank insisted on appointing Grant Thornton as receivers. It is, to my mind, Mr. Deputy Speaker, appalling, but it is within the law. They did so by making an immediate demand on Heritage's overdraft, even though the company was within every term of its complex facility letter. Currently, this is within the law. The company had only 2 banking hours to meet this demand, even though they knew from past experience that Heritage plc could borrow the money from its customers. Currently, 2 banking hours is within the law, even for a company with a London Stock Exchange listing. The restructuring proposal would have benefited all stakeholders by at least £600,000. And Heritage, of course, also had several £1 million worth in intangibles, goodwill, a quotation, tax losses which were immediately lost. The restructuring proposal would have maintained most of the jobs. The merger would have maintained all the value for all stakeholders as well as all of the jobs. Lloyd's TSB do not appear to be subject to the current regulations, and amazingly Grant Thornton accepted the receivership. And this appointment was accepted in order to hide their misdeeds as reporting accountants. They were conflicted from accepting the receivership, having previously been the company's tax advisors. That conflict manifested itself by one of Rayner's personal friends, Brian Michael Martz, a senior partner at Grant Thornton, representing his interests and opinions to the receivers. Even though Rayner was reported to the DTI as unfit conduct, it is arguable that a firm that was not conflicted could have made a more thorough investigation of sales ledger write-off following Rayner's stewardship, a process that Heritage had started before the receivership. In their evidence to the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, they admitted, not considering it necessary to inform their client Heritage, that its financial director was committing an illegal act. They also withheld the misdeeds from the company's auditors. Grant Thornton recorded their appointment, and the timing here is crucial, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Grant Thornton recorded their appointment on 10:30 in the morning on the 11th of July 1996. Lloyd's TSB Bank later claimed they were not appointed until after 3:24 that afternoon. And this timing difference, as I put it, is crucial, as written confirmation of the merger proposals arrived at 12:20 that same day, in the middle of these 2 periods. Grant Thornton refused to discuss it either with Heritage plc directors or with its legal advisors. The proposal, as they well knew, was dependent on the maintenance of the stock exchange listing, which was lost once their appointment was announced. If they had waited until after receiving instructions according to the bank's timing, this proposal could have been properly explored. Grant Thornton misled the creditors about the restructuring proposal. They also ignored 1995 audited accounts in their meeting with London creditors, moving all of the write-off from Mr. Rayner's stewardship of the sale ledger to the year after Mr. Rayner left. Now, this concealed the substantial recovery of the company, which everybody at the company had worked so hard to achieve. The Manchester creditors were shown the truth about the recovery. Initially, and again I come back to that, initially Grant Thornton claimed the 2 missing reports were sent by courier to the company, but they couldn't prove it. Subsequently, they claimed that a draft of the second one was sent to Mr. Lambert's house on 9 August 95, but they couldn't prove that either. Finally, they claimed it was faxed to his house that evening, but they couldn't prove that either. 2 days after the Court of Appeal hearing in November 1998 between Lloyds TSB Bank and Mr. Lampert, Grant Thornton claimed in a letter to the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, he must have seen this report as he invested as a result of their findings. Now, this is peculiar. As I've mentioned earlier, up until early 1998, Lloyds TSB Bank solicitors claimed that the to-concealed report didn't exist. Now he should have reacted to it. This concealment is a clear breach, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of Section 47 of the Financial Services Act 1986. And it should concern this House that Grant Thornton can believe that it can get away with actions like these. I'm told that the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales has yet to censure insolvency practitioners employed by a major firm. The insolvency industry, by having incestuous relationships, one with the other, can take advantage of any business that may find itself in a downturn. In the case of Heritage, this happened a year after the company had begun to recover. And at the same time, they're able to conceal their own and each other's misdeeds, and I don't think that can be right. No business people should be encouraged to invest in themselves when the insolvency industry can grab that investment with impunity. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have three questions and then a small conclusion. The first question is, what progress has the Insolvency Service made in its review of the various complaints against Grant Thornton? And my second question is the Minister, my honourable friend, prepared to launch a thorough investigation into the receivership of Heritage PLC? And the last question, does the Minister intend to use his powers to bring charges under Section 47 of the Financial Services Act of 1986? In conclusion, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I've of course met with Mr. Geoffrey Lampert on several occasions, and we've been on the phone an awful lot. I've also been in contact with Lloyds TSB and with all other parties mentioned in my presentation, with the absence of the accountants firm. Mr. and Mrs. Lampert have gone through hell and back again about their experiences. And despite all of this, Mr. Lampert remains a jovial, gregarious man, a man of great ability, an honest family man, a man who will not give up this fight. I wish him and his family well, and I will stand by them. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Dr. Kim Howells.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I congratulate my honourable friend on securing this debate, and I listened to his speech very carefully. I think he's spoken with great passion and commitment on behalf of his constituent, Mr. Lampert, and I'll try to answer the three most important questions which he posed. And I'm sure that he's well aware that the regulation of the insolvency practice, and insolvency practitioners indeed, has been a subject of interest to many, both within and outside of this House. And it's a great shame, I think, that there's no one opposite, no government, no opposition minister, if you like, shadow minister, to hear this. The particular case of...
Interrupt the honourable gentleman, but the Speaker has made it clear that on such occasions these are adjournment debates, which are personal debates raised by a member, replied to by a minister, and nothing more than that. Dr. Kim Howells.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm chastened. I'm still very interested as to why there's nobody from the opposition here to listen to it, however. But I certainly accept your advice on that. Particularly so because the case of Heritage PLC, to which my honourable friend refers, has very much been at the forefront of that interest recently. And if in the short time that I've got left, I could say a few words about the regulation of insolvency practitioners generally, because this is at the heart, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of my honourable friend's adjournment debate, the case that he's put. Now, the introduction of a regulated profession came with the Insolvency Act in 1986. Under the Act, practitioners may be authorised by recognised professional bodies. And those bodies are recognised for that purpose by the Secretary of State and include the principal accountancy bodies, the Insolvency Practitioners Association and the law societies in England and Wales and Scotland. Recognition is on the basis that the bodies have rules to ensure that practitioners have appropriate educational qualifications and experience, that they remain fit and proper to carry out the job. The bodies are responsible for the regulation of the practitioners they authorise. Now, the Secretary of State, Mr. Deputy Speaker, also has a residual licensing function. And the officials at the DTI's insolvency service are and continue to be in close contact with the professional bodies. This is an essential part of the ongoing development of the regulatory process. In particular, officials visit the bodies to examine their procedures in relation to authorizations, monitoring and handling of complaints. However, this is very much a review of procedures. It's not intended to be a review of decisions on individual cases, and indeed the Secretary of State has no power to undertake such a review. Appropriate procedural recommendations are made where there appears to be scope for improvements. The bodies have responded positively to these recommendations, and I believe that procedures have been tightened up and further controls introduced where necessary. And perhaps, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I might add that the Insolvency Service Regulation Working Party, in its recently published report, found no evidence that regulation had been rendered less effective by its being administered by the professional bodies. And I'm inclined to believe that the Working Party, by and large, got things right. Now, if I could turn for a moment to the case of Heritage PLC. Mr. Geoffrey Lampert, my honourable friend's constituent, the former chairman and principal shareholder of the company, came to see officials in my department's insolvency service in February 1998. As my honourable friend has said, he had concerns about the actions of Grant Thornton, two of whose partners had been appointed joint administrative receivers of Heritage PLC and other companies in the Heritage Group. Grant Thornton previously had undertaken financial appraisals of the group on the instructions of its bankers Lloyds. Officials explained to Mr. Lampert that the receivers were authorised to act as insolvency practitioners by the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. His complaints were therefore a matter for the Institute in the first instance, and with his agreement, an outline of Mr. Lampert's complaint and a supporting bundle of papers were forwarded by the AEW by my officials, forwarded to them by my officials. Now, I don't think that I need go into all of the details of Mr. Lampert's complaint. I certainly don't have time to do that. It's suffice to say that his concerns included a possible conflict of interest on the part of the receivers and an alleged failure to provide copies of reports to the Board of Directors. And that's precisely the case which my honourable friend has made here this afternoon. Mr. Lampert's complaint was considered by the ICAEW's Investigation Committee on the 16th of March of this year. The committee decided that no prima facie case for disciplinary action had been made out. Now, Mr. Lampert was dissatisfied with this outcome and contacted officials once more. They explained to him, as did the ICAEW, that it was open to him to ask for the committee's decision to be referred to the Institute's independent reviewer of complaints. Now, as I understand it, Mr. Lampert has not so far done this, but this option, which is the next stage of the procedure, remains available to him. In the interim, officials have met with representatives of the ICAEW and have looked at the Institute's files on the case. This is in no sense a review of the committee's decision. As I said earlier, the Secretary of State has no power to review the decision of a professional body. However, officials did examine the procedures and they were satisfied that they were properly carried out. They also took the view that the decision reached by the committee was not an unreasonable decision. Mr. Lampert also contacted the DTI on the separate issue of whether there had been an offence under Section 47 of the Financial Services Act, which relates to the alleged failure of Grant Thornton to provide copy reports to the Board of Directors of Heritage. Now, my department gave the matter careful consideration, but concluded that there was nothing in the allegation which should be pursued further. I understand, and I think my honourable friend has confirmed it today, that Mr. Lampert has also been in touch with Financial Services, the Financial Services Authority, about the actions of Lloyds Bank, and no doubt the FSA will be considering whether there is any action which they should be taking. And I think my honourable friend has made that case very, very clear. Now, I've got considerable sympathy for the position in which Mr. Lampert finds himself. He has provided Lloyds Bank with a very substantial personal guarantee. He has pursued his complaints with various agencies with great diligence. If, however, he wishes to pursue his complaint further against the receivers, his only option would appear to be to ask the Institute to refer the matter to the review of complaints. And certainly, I don't see that there is anything further that the DTI can do to help him in this respect. But there's one further issue that I wish to raise. One of the areas of complaint which Mr. Lampert has is that the partners in Grant Thornton had a conflict of interest, which my honourable friend illustrated very clearly when they accepted appointment as administrative receivers. Now, the possibility of such a conflict, where the appointment follows an earlier appointment as investigating accountant, has been the subject of previous concern. The insolvency professional bodies have issued specific guidance to practitioners which, in effect, states that a practitioner will not normally be prevented from taking a subsequent appointment as receiver, where the appointment as receiver may be called into question if the circumstances of the initial appointment as investigating accountant are such as to prevent open discussion of the financial affairs of the company with the directors. These and other issues concerning the relationship between banks and business customers have been addressed by the British Bankers Association in its Statement of Principles issued in March 1997. The Statement of Principles seeks to show how banks intend to work together with businesses to get the relationship right from the outset and to help if businesses get into difficulties. And that's a point that my honourable friend made early on. This rescue culture is something we've got to look at and are looking at very carefully if we're to save jobs and to save people from bankruptcy in situations like this. The banks currently are reviewing their experience of nearly 2 years' operation of the Statement of Principles. And it would seem that the framework set out in the Statement of Principles should discourage any notion that the appointment of investigating accountants will inevitably lead to the appointment of that firm, or indeed of any other firm, as administrative receivers. Indeed, it's interesting to note that in a recent survey by the Society of Practitioners for Insolvency for the period 1996 to 97, practitioners reported that the overall business preservation rate for companies in rescue-oriented procedures, receiverships, administrations, and company voluntary arrangements was 59%. This does not mean, however, that there's any room for complacency regarding this issue. The government wishes to see as many companies as possible being encouraged to overcome any short-term financial problems they may experience. And this is an area which will be kept under very close scrutiny. And I'm very glad that my honourable friend has raised this particular case, because I think it'll be an object for us to study very carefully, and I think that he's made the case very carefully and very clearly, and we will look at it very closely.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as of that opinion say aye, the contrary no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.
House of Commons sound. House of Commons sound.